Okay, Nikki, I'm going to show you what I did to work the problem that you emailed me about. So first things first, this was the matrix you were provided. The way that the textbook explains for you to find multiplicative inverse of a 3 by 3 is you write what's called the identity matrix next to it, which is a diagonal of ones, everything else zeros. It's same dimensions as that. And then you do row operations to make this side of the matrix the identity matrix. So the things that you're going to see me doing here are acceptable row operations that will cause this whole diagonal to be ones and everything else to be zeros. In other words, create the identity matrix. And I start with the top left number, work down. Go to the next row, work down. Go to the next column and work down. So this whole first, I guess, this original 1 and 0 were exactly what I wanted them to be. So I had to start with the -7. So it's acceptable to multiply a whole row by a non-zero number and then add it to another row. So the decision I did was 7 times row 1 plus row 3 to give me a new row 3, because that would cause that to be 0 like we need it to be. And I have to do that to every single element. So 7 times 1 is 7 plus -7 is 0. 7 times -1 is -7 plus -8 is -15. 7 times 1 is 7 plus 0 is 7. And I did that all the way across. So I had the first column exactly how I needed it to be. Then I circled this guy because I'm going to make him a 0 next. I'm going to do that by doing 1/2 times row 2, which takes half of 2 and makes it 1. Adds row 1 to it to give us a new row 1, which will cause that to be 0. You see me doing that all the way across the board to get new numbers in row 1. Then I moved on to this guy, and I need to make him a 1 because that's the identity matrix has a 1 right there, and that can get accomplished by just taking half of that row. So that's what I do here. Half of row 2 gives me a new row 2, so you'll see me taking half of all of those numbers that you see in row 2. Then I go to the -15 and do a row operation to make him a 0 because that's what he is in the identity matrix. That is going to be 15 times row 2, add it to row 3 to give me a new row 3. So you'll see row 3 changing with that move, okay? So I've got the first two columns situated. Then I'm going to go and make him a 0, and him a 1. So I'm working to make this a 0 right now, the positive 1/2. And I'm going to do that by simply adding row 3 and row 1 together. Let me backtrack and show you. I went down to row 3. I could have technically used either one of these -1/2 and added it to positive 1/2 to get 0, but I knew that I didn't want to mess up any of this previous stuff, okay? So, for example, if I decided I'm going to add row 2 and row 1 to get a new row 1, row 2 and row 1 to get a new row 1, I would mess that 0 up. So I bumped all the way down to row 3. I'm going to add these two together, or across the board really. Add together, get a new one. Add together, get a new one. Add together, get a new one, so that I can accomplish that 0. And that's what you see happening in all of this. Then I circle that because I'm moving on to him to make him a 0. I'm going to bump down here and know that if I multiply this by a -1, a negative times a negative is a positive 1/2. Add it to a -1/2 and I'll make that 0. So that's -1 times row 3 plus row 2 gives me a new row 2. So row 2 changed like I needed it to across the board. That's happening. Then I need for this guy to become a 1, okay? Making a -1/2 a 1 is accomplished by multiplying by -2. So I did a -2 times row 3 to give me an entire new row 3. That is our identity matrix, therefore causing this to be your multiplicative inverse.